I know your company, your firm, you're a holder of Microsoft, so I want to get your take on those earnings as well as Meta.
Yeah, so Microsoft and Meta both published good earnings, but as you just sort of touched on, it really is about the guidance going forward. Two very different stories. We're more constructive about Meta. Top line revenues of 19% year on year, very, very strong. But for us, the key is operating leverage as they deploy AI and infuse it into their business model and drive productivity. Their earnings per share, 30% year on year, so very, very strong. So we think the Meta results, we think the market is overreacting based on volatility in the markets and also election next week. Microsoft, on the other hand, is a very different story. They're investing for a build-out within their compute infrastructure, just like the cloud back in 2013. Our concern about Microsoft is actually a step down in the EPS growth going forward, and I think that's what's being priced into the market as we speak.
I want to talk to you about something else, chips. Your firm is a holder of NVIDIA, but I want to be clear. It is a holding of yours, but you've actually been trimming that holding off of its highs. What did you think about the action that we saw in chips yesterday? Obviously, Supermicro was part of that.
Yeah, so we've had a very strong bounce off the lows for technology since the back end of July. We think it's very important to be trimming into strength like we've seen in particularly the last 4 weeks. So we're not surprised there's been a bit of a pause, but we've seen time and time again that Microsoft and Meta are going to up their capex going into next year. So for us, it's all about the price we pay. So we'll be trimming whenever the market gets strong. We still think the Blackwell demand profile is going to be very strong going into next year. So we're very constructive on NVIDIA longer term. However, we're starting to see earnings growth appear outside of NVIDIA going forward in the networking names. We've been reminded again last night the importance of earnings growth going forward from Microsoft and Meta, and we think that's also going to be important within the chip sector.
We're going to get some of those networking names that you're talking about, but very quickly, when you're talking about the price that you're paying, are you talking valuation or literal stock price?
Yeah, so valuation. So you've got Microsoft at the moment on about 35 times earnings, and if they're achieving only 10% annualized CAGR of EPS growth going forward, maybe 35 times earnings is a bit too expensive. However, Meta on about 25 times earnings, achieving earnings per share growth of 30% going forward, we think that's more attractive from a valuation point of view.
All right, let's get to your thesis on networking. So you and I were chatting yesterday. You had a lot of confidence about these hyperscaler earnings, Microsoft, Azure, Amazon reports later today. Does what you saw here, Microsoft actually guiding for a bit of a slowdown in cloud growth, does that change that thesis at all? We're going to show some networking stocks. We did a segment about this earlier this week. Cisco is one of the names that we looked at. Arista is one of the names that we looked at. The reports that we saw yesterday, did it change your thesis that we're going to see kind of a second level move when it comes to networking stocks and things like this following these reports?
Yeah, so the two things we do know is the more compute you have and the more data you have, the smarter the AI models are getting. And we got a good read through from Meta last night from Mark Zuckerberg saying that they're in the pre-training stage for Llama 4, and he's training that on a GPU cluster of over 100,000 GPUs. Now, if you rewind back sort of 18 months, these clusters were around about 10,000 GPUs. So this is a significant build out in the size of the training clusters. When you've got a small cluster, the value accrues to the GPUs, about 80% to the GPUs, 20% to networking. As these clusters get larger, they're much larger systems, and you get more value accruing to the networking providers. So we think the value goes from about 20-80 split to around 40-60 split. So companies like Arista and Broadcom are well positioned to benefit as networking grabs a larger slice of the pie.